All right, we are back with your favorite podcast show of the week. This is Location Weekly, and it's episode number 459. And we are still recording, of course, and bringing you the show every week in the COVID crisis. Of course, many of the stories that we're covering are about companies adjusting and restructuring and delivering new augmented services in this time. So that's sort of the general theme of what's going on. Brianna, how are you?
I am hanging in there. I'm doing pretty good. I am back in Atlanta. You can only take so much family time. Well, like extended family time or like parent family time. So we are back here for a little bit, and my kids are just getting back into the routine of school now. But yeah, I think that it could be a whole lot worse. So I'm grateful and we're healthy. How are you doing?
Yeah, we're good. We're good. So yesterday, my kids started on sort of official online school with the teachers actually teaching virtually and all that sort of stuff. So that'll be a bit of an adjustment because it's been kind of just a free fall the weeks leading up to it. Kind of just trying to get them to do something other than just running around or playing or whatever. So that's happening. So there's a bit more structure to the day, which is good. I don't know. I've been pretty busy actually. A lot of virtual meetings. I think sort of mid half of last week, everything kind of sort of resettled and everybody sort of realized, hey, we're in this. We just got to get back to work. And so there's a lot of work happening again. So that's good. So we're all good. Everybody's healthy and happy and fine for now. So yeah.
That's good.
Here you go.
Yeah, it's definitely, I feel like everybody's probably having the same challenges in terms of like getting as much accomplished as they did before, or, for people who maybe don't have, kids, maybe it's hard for them to like turn off the work and separate themselves from it. And for us with families and other people in the house, it's hard, just to get as much accomplished. And the day seems to go by really fast for me, and trying to fit in all the things that I did before with, exercising and family time and, getting out emails and follow-ups and everything else that has to be done is just, it's been a little bit of a challenge for me, but, I'm just trying to adjust and learning better practices every day. And that's all you can do. So,
yeah. So as I indicated last week, so because we're all in sort of isolation now and kind of working from home and whatnot, we're going to launch a new series starting today with our podcast show. So we'll still, if there's kind of big news stories, leveraging location data, we'll cover that stuff. And we've got 4 good stories for you this week. But in the middle of every episode, we're going to feature some guest interviews for the next number of weeks, what we're calling Members at Home. And basically, we're just going to interview different member companies, different brands, different agency people from across the globe, and kind of talk to them about how their business has been affected by the COVID crisis, how they've adjusted to it, what their companies are doing in reaction to it, and so on. So you can expect a number of those over the next coming weeks. And we have a start of that this week with an interview with Gimbal. So that's, something interesting to look forward to. But to kick off the show, I'll let Brianna start it off as per normal. So.
All right. Well, as you know, ride share and transportation industry is drastically down right now with what's going on in the world. And so Uber Eats is sort of pivoting and trying to figure out what else they can offer and how they can still deliver value and obviously generate revenue. And so they are now moving into grocery delivery. And this is more about kind of a boutique delivery service. They want to bring necessities to people, and they're hoping and aiming to do that within 30 minutes, which is really fast. They did a trial last year in Australia, but obviously with the current global pandemic, they're moving their efforts forward more quickly and, trying to kind of make things happen, I think, as soon as possible. So they are doing this collaboration with Carrefour in France, the supermarket out of France. So they will be working with about 15 stores in the Paris area. Carrefour right now currently delivers in Spain with a Spanish startup called Glovo. And now they're going to, I guess, expand their partnerships in terms of, delivery with Uber Eats. They're also planning to deliver like food items from gas stations and convenience stores in Spain. And they've teamed up with a Portuguese energy group called Galp, that's GALP. In Brazil, in Sao Paulo, they're delivering goods from, drugstores, grocery stores. So they're working with Pague Menos, which are pharmacies, the Shell convenience stores, and Kobasi pet shops, which I guess is like one of the widely, used pet retail stores there. So they're offering the services. What I like about this is they're offering the services via the Uber Eats app, but also you can use just by phone, just like, calling in the services for those who don't have smartphones or don't maybe have internet connectivity, which I think is great because those are probably the people that have lots of needs right now. And they're planning to launch in other Brazil cities and states over the next couple of weeks. And they're looking, they're just looking at grocery store partnerships around the world right now that they can engage with so that they can kind of grow out these, this food delivery option that they're looking for. So obviously I think this is great. Right now, if you try to get on Instacart and get, anything delivered to you, you're looking at, instead of a wait time of like 2 hours or, half a day like it used to be, now you're looking at days, to maybe a week before you can get anything. And so it's really hard to, get anything delivered to you. And for people maybe who are, older or more at risk, or there's areas that are worse, I think this is really important. And so I love that, there's a lot of companies, there's a lot of opportunity right now, I think, as well, just to provide services and delivering goods, because it's really hard to get anything. I mean, even when you go to the supermarket, there's such a shortage. At least around here, of a lot of things. And so I think this is great. And, I think that there's probably opportunities even further outside of food delivery, but looking at how do you make sure that, the resources are there, because right now it's also a supply and demand problem. So I think that, there's a lot of opportunity in the market, even though a lot of segments of the market have really just kind of stopped and halted due to this. So hopefully this will be a good thing for a lot of people and providing value to those who really need, their medicine or anything like that delivered.
Yeah, no, I think this is a good story, and the supply and demand part I'll talk about later on in the show with a different story. But for me, what I like about this is that they're finding ways to leverage a existing platform to sort of provide another level of service during this time, and in particular, I think for older folks who maybe it's harder for them to get out, or whatnot, being able to deliver prescriptions, being able to deliver groceries to them, being able to get it to them quickly, in 30 minutes or whatever the case might be. I think there's a lot of value in that. I know for our family, certainly we've been using Uber Eats and Skip the Dishes, which is another one up here, more than we did before, because nobody's going out to restaurants or, anything like that. So that's certainly something that I think, these types of platforms are probably seeing an uptake in business that way. But these drivers are out there anyways. So, it doesn't really matter what they're bringing you. It's the fact that they can bring you something in a time when you should be staying at home. And so, yeah, I love it. I love that they're testing this. I think, all grocery chains should be embracing some sort of home delivery type of platform, because I think it's kind of the right solution for this time, right? And it's interesting. Like I was talking to somebody the other day. I wonder, once we're through this crisis, like what the percentage of people who just stay with online ordering and don't ever go back to the store, what that sort of incremental increase in online orders is going to be like post-COVID. So I think it will be significant. And similarly, I think lots of people who are working from home right now will continue to work from home. because they see, it's viable for them. The impacts on things like commercial real estate and so on downstream, I think, are going to be massive in terms of just empty space and some of these companies, not surviving. But as far as delivery is concerned, I think this is a great move for Uber Eats. So yeah, good story. All right, our second story is a big one, I think, for our industry, and basically what we're talking about here is Foursquare, which everybody knows, yesterday announced that they have acquired and they're merging with Factual, another big player in our industry. Both these companies have been around for a long time. You might recall Foursquare also last year acquired Placed, David Shim's company. And so now you basically have this combination of the three companies all under one banner. So Factual, Foursquare, and Place all sort of rolled up together. And you can sort of look at it as, Foursquare with their sort of base location data, originally derived from the consumer app of, all the people checking in and visits and all that sort of stuff. You have sort of Placed there as one of the leaders, in the early days of sort of on the attribution side of measuring, sort of people's actual visits to to businesses, to brands, to stores, et cetera. And then you have sort of Factual there, sort of this audience segmentation layer, sort of also, a fairly good location data set, sort of all coming together in one banner. I think it's interesting. I think the timing is super interesting for this to happen. We're coming off just sort of at the end of 2019 was the first time Foursquare sort of announced a profitable quarter, in the history of the company. I understand, sort of last year, the combined Foursquare Placed said that they did 100 million in revenue. They think together the three companies will do 150 million in projected, revenue together, which is nothing to sneeze at in our industry. I think that's, a sizable, number. And the combined company, they're talking about 400 employees, which I also think is a reasonable number. So there's a lot of, sort of reasonable sort of numbers that are associated with this sort of mashup of companies. Gil, who's Ilbaz, who's the founder of Factual, who's joining the executive team of the new sort of merged company. So, David Shim, who's the current CEO of Foursquare, will stay in that position. Gil's going to join the executive team. Apparently, Gil's also writing a large check and reinvesting in the company personally. So we'll see what that entails. There wasn't any details on that. But I think it speaks to sort of, our industry is going to see a significant amount of consolidation, I think, over the next 12 to 18 months. And I think there will be many companies that don't survive this crisis, and could be opportunities presented for many other players, Foursquare and others included. So that's sort of my initial thoughts on this. What about you, Brianna?
Yeah, I agree with the fact that there's going to be a lot of consolidation of players in the space right now. I think there's it's a little bit of a crowded market. You've got a lot of different players offering different things that are very focused on location specifically. And I think it's a tough time for location. I think that, when you consider the fact that before this COVID crisis happened, you had a lot of, new legislation coming in that was putting pressure on privacy and compliance in terms of location data. The media has really frowned upon the location data. They've given it a bad rap in a lot of their, stories. Even this they continue to put out about, these location providers. They tend to focus on, kind of the creepy factor of location data versus, the helpfulness and the leveraging location data as a utility. And so I think that it's a challenging time. So I do think we're going to see a lot more consolidation. And so I think when location is at the forefront of everything that you do, it could be challenging if that's maybe all that you offer. And I do think we'll see more consolidation, as well as, some of the smaller players start to phase out. The other challenge we have right now is that people aren't moving. People are staying home. And so if you're not taking into consideration, maybe connectivity and context and behavioral understanding and preference, I think that you have a lot of challenges when it comes to the audience space as a whole. So, I think it's interesting. It was an all stock deal that they did here. And so there's not a lot of numbers that we have to go off of. But I think that the timing is very interesting, as you mentioned, that this is happening now when there's probably a lot more challenges that are taking place. So yeah, I mean, I anticipate, hearing more. I think that Factual probably had a pretty good Rolodex of clients that they're bringing over to Foursquare, because when Foursquare pivoted, I think that, the acquisition of clients was probably a little more challenging for them getting into the game maybe later than Factual was. So I think that probably combined, they are maybe able to offer a little bit more in terms of service, and then obviously like growing their client list overnight. So those are probably the pluses of the deal that I would see it right now.
Yeah, and I think it also gives them a nice strong presence, sort of both East Coast, West Coast, right now in the U.S. market, with obviously Foursquare based in New York and Factual based in California. So that's I think that's a nice little side benefit in terms of reach and kind of where the densities of employees are and things like that. So yeah, and I'm super happy for Gil. I mean, he's been a leader in our industry for a long time. So anytime guys like that can kind of have something good happen and kind of have this type of merger happen, I think it's good. Same as super happy for David when that happened last year with Placed. So so congrats guys, and good luck, and we'll be watching. All right, so that's our first two stories for this week. As I said, we're kicking off our new Members at Home series with some guest interviews. So the first of which is an interview with Matt Russo, who's the Chief Marketing Officer at Gimbal. So here he is. All right, we are excited because we're kicking off our Members at Home podcast series here, and I'm chatting with Matt from Gimbal. How are you?
Hanging in there. It's the new normal. Yeah, and officially at home, as you can see from the background.
There you go. So maybe just who are you? What's your title, role, company, all that sort of stuff, just to get that out there.
Sure. So I'm Matt Russo. I am the Chief Operating and Marketing Officer for Gimbal. We are out of mostly the Los Angeles city, and our headquarters is based in Los Angeles, but we also have offices prior to the COVID hit in New York City, Chicago, San Francisco, and a handful of other satellite cities as well. So yeah, for the past 3 weeks now, all of Gimbal has been work from home, and things are quiet on the home front at the moment. I got 2 young daughters who are currently out on a bike and scooter ride, so it's relatively quiet, but also apologies if the dog gets going in the background. It's kind of the status quo these days.
Yeah, excellent. I think we're all living that same strange dream right now. But anyhow, yeah, so one of the things that we're trying to do is we're reaching out to different members all over the world and just trying to see how the COVID crisis is impacting them and their businesses. So, I mean, you're obviously working at home. I assume everybody in the company is working from home. Has there been any challenges for that? Have you had to adopt new technologies? Is there, any new strategies that you've had to put in place to kind of adapt the business?
Yeah. So we, as I mentioned, we have already been a distributed company across at least, 5 to 8 cities at any given time. And so working from team to team and city to city is not new to us. The additional layer is how you interact with, team members that are in the same city, but can't be in the same room. And so, like a lot of other companies, we were using Zoom and Slack ahead of that, but now, they become even more integral to how our team members interact with one another and how we get work done. I think on a certain level, personally, I always, the grass is always greener on the other side, meaning, I've always thought about what it would be like to have a fully distributed team. I know Automatic, who's the parent company of WordPress, and some other platforms and tools are fully distributed. I think they're around 800 or 900 employees full time, and they don't have a headquarters. They don't have any offices. Everybody is work from home or work from coffee shop. And it wasn't until COVID hit that it really puts into place, how organized you have to be, how aligned everyone has to be. Because you can't just huddle up in a room and talk through things. It's a lot of calibrating schedules and calendars and overlapping priorities, and making sure that you can get the right people on the line and make sure that those virtual meetings are as efficient as they can be. So it's as efficient as it can be, but it's not it's not as easy as I would have imagined it to be, for sure.
Have you had to reinvest in your home decorating budget for all the backgrounds in the Zoom meetings, or what's going on?
Like a lot of people, I am the background selection that I can apply virtual backgrounds has grown increasingly, and taken advantage of some new Zoom capabilities as well. So we got some video backgrounds too, but it actually works really well, especially when you've got little ones running around in the background. And it's funny, initially, I was very, very cognizant of, okay, I'll keep a virtual background up so that if little ones come wandering in, it kind of cuts them out. But as people become more and more isolated, or more time goes by, people love seeing, especially little kids, kind of wander up and say hello and wave, and it kind of brings personality to a meeting, as well as I guess insight into like what my daily life looks like when you're used to working with coworkers and it's just all business all the time.
Yeah. Have you had to come up with any interesting strategies to kind of deal with the social element of still keeping people connected or interacting with each other beyond sort of the day-to-day business stuff, like just the fun part of being in an office, right? How have you handled that?
Yeah, we've done some virtual happy hours. Everybody grabs a beer or whatever and fires up the Zoom. And we've actually done it with some friends from, I say back home, which is where I'm originally from, back in Columbus, Ohio. And we've fired it up. It's 8:30 there, it's 5:30 here. And just, it's good to see everybody and say hey, and let the kids talk and run around. And yeah, it's, it's not as good as being in person, but short of that, I mean, it's challenging. It's not the same as being in the same room. And even the flow of information, that's been the hardest part is, when you're just walking around the office, even from meeting to meeting, it's easy to pop over and say, hey, Liz, how's XYZ going on the marketing front? Do you need anything? Now you have to make an effort to Slack that person, or to send an email, or set yourself a reminder to check in on those things where it's not as organic as it was previously.
Yeah. So shifting over to the actual business itself, like how has the crisis impacted Gimbal as far as, sort of just being able to keep up with clients, the demand, and, sort of that side of things in terms of the sort of regular business of Gimbal. And then secondarily, has there been any opportunities that have arisen to kind of use your solutions, use your tech, your data, your whatever, to kind of help, sort of alleviate the issue of the crisis at all in any way? So has there been any new opportunities that have come out of it?
Yeah. So I think the biggest challenge out of all of this is nobody knows when things are going to change, or how quickly they're going to revert back to kind of how they were previously. And I think it's obvious that there's not going to be a flip of a switch and everything's just going to go back to the way they were before, which makes forecasting things challenging, not just from our business's side, but from everybody, right? And so an example is we have some cruise ship customers as well as hotel customers. And we obviously, it's very sector and industry specific. Restaurants were obviously hit very hard, very quickly. And cruise ships, were hit very hard, very quickly, but also it's their perspective that obviously this isn't going to go on forever. Right. But is it going to be back to quote normal in a month, or in a quarter or in a year. And so, while we had cancellations, especially on the media side, there were more that were, kind of paused, and clients who said, hey, we aren't canceling this. In fact, some of our big cruise ship clients are saying, our budget for the year is not changing. It's just getting pushed to the latter half of the year. And so it'll ultimately be up to them to decide how quickly they re-implement some of those budgets, what that ramp up schedule looks like. And it's going to be based on, the guidance that comes from the government, and also, how they position their messaging to their customers around what's safe, why, and changing, consumer perception around, why people should be going on cruises, or why people should be taking flights again, and some of the precautions that they're taking.
Yeah, certainly lots of verticals have been severely impacted like that, especially travel, hospitality, and the restaurant industry. Yep. So I completely get that. And yeah, we've heard a lot of the same thing. A lot of those budgets are still there. They may get shifted into different forms in terms of how they get allocated, once this all comes back. Obviously the whole physical conference market, part of what we do at the LBMA is kind of gone, right? And you guys obviously go to a lot of conferences and so on. That's completely gone for now, but there's a lot of new virtual conferences popping up and different ways to do that. So I think we're evaluating that. I think many people are. But let's go to the other part of it, which is, have you seen any new opportunities come up during this time of different ways to use what you guys do to kind of help the situation?
Yeah, so I think the winners in a lot of this are the companies that frankly don't rely just on in-person interactions or in-person transactions to make their business. So, cruise lines and airlines, they require people to be on their ship for that utility or for that experience. For other brands or retailers where there was more of an omni-channel opportunity, COVID has basically forced the digital component of that to their offering. And so now if there are opportunities to make a sale online and then transact, maybe not in person as they have been previously, but buy online, pick up in store, or in-store restaurants for pickup services. There are definitely opportunities there, especially as, I think there will be the floodgates when reopened, when people are like, hey, we can get back together in groups that are bigger than 6 or 10 people. I think they will want to go into the in-person settings to go dine with people and do those experiences. But in the meantime, they need an alternative. People still need to eat. People still need groceries. So while social distancing is still kind of a requirement in the new norm, they'll need to figure out what solutions they can put in place to facilitate that.
Cool. Yeah, and I think from our side, we're as we talk to different members globally, and we kind of are doing a lot of these interviews and doing different discussions. We're seeing from a data perspective and a location perspective, lots of interesting ways that people are trying to sort of leverage that kind of stuff. Obviously, privacy is a stumbling block for many. Still, we continue to talk about that, but I think there's some unique opportunities to go into, as you said, verticals that, or like the online world, to kind of really find kind of not necessarily new revenue, but just a shift of where the focus is, right? So yeah, I can totally appreciate where you're coming with that. So very good. Well, Matt, we really appreciate you jumping on the show and kind of coming in for our new members at home series. Again, for our audience, we've been chatting with Matt Russo. He's the CMO and COO at Gimbal. Thanks so much, Matt, and stay safe, stay healthy, stay well, stay sane. All those things that are super important at this time. We really appreciate it.
Sounds good. Appreciate the time as always.
All right. Take care.
Have a good one.
All right. Thanks, Matt. We really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your story of isolation and working in that environment. Always great to have and connect with you. So thanks so much. All right. So moving back to our industry news, I'll let Aubriana kick off our third story for the week.
So we're going to go over to the Philippines for this story, and there is an app called SIF or SIF. I don't know which one it is, but It's capital SIF. And so it's a Filipino, what they're calling it is a super app. And it's offering this ginormous wide variety of services. So location-based services is kind of where it started. So you think of like grooming, wellness, coaching, self-improvement programs, all of those types of things. And now it's also extended to, you know, automobile repairs, maintenance through what they call SIF Motors. There's a cloud kitchen food service, part of SIF Food. There's SIF Home. You know, they're working on another update that would focus more even on like health and learning, master skills, law, all types of, I guess, like self-improvement or kind of at-home learning. And what they did though now is they've announced the inclusion of telemedicine. Obviously, right now we have, you know, this global pandemic that's keeping people at home. And so the ability to get to and from places, or maybe to see what people may not deem as, you know, like emergency medical care has been a little complicated. And so this is going to be telemedicine consultations through the hospital system and through health service provider partners that SIF is working with. So they'll have like psychiatrists, you know, accredited medical professionals from different fields of specialization that, you know, can provide consultations without patients having to even leave their home. And so they can do video calls. Just, I mean, I do this, you know, with my kids when it's midnight and I think they have something, you know, I've done it before and it's super helpful. It's really easy. And so, you know, with the current quarantine going on and the landscape of what's happening in the world, you know, this is, I think, a great expansion and offering for them. And, you know, what's interesting is that this app is really expected to be sort of the country's first unicorn, you know, tech giant that's coming out of the Philippines. And so, you know, I think that like consolidation in terms of apps is always really great. We've talked about that before, like not having the need to have an app for every single little thing on your device. And so when you can have lots of services offered maybe through one specific app, I think there's power in that. And I like the idea though of, you know, focusing on something that the world needs right now and delivering, you know, this telemedicine offering to people of the Philippines. So I think this is, again, it's great thinking from a business perspective, but it's also thinking about how can we deliver what customers and consumers really need right now with this, you know, with the current environment and everything that's going on. So I do expect that we'll see, you know, a continued growth in telemedicine and even more wide, you know, a more widely accepted offering of these types of things. You know, I think one of the challenges is here, like in the US, for example, is, you know, getting an antibiotic or something like that. Typically the doctors want to see you, but, you know, now in these times, there's probably going to be a little bit less hesitation about giving that, you know, type of medicine and diagnoses online and through a video call versus how it used to be. And I think that there's going to be more widely acceptance of that, and, you know, not having to leave your home to get, have a session with your therapist or whatever you may need, which I think that lots of us are going to need that over the next, several weeks and months, you know, just having somebody else to talk to and sort through things. So I think this is great.
Yeah, no, I love what they're doing. I mean, I like the sort of breadth of their platform in terms of all the different services that are there. But the telemedicine piece in particular, I think, is super helpful, especially in this time, that we're dealing with. We've used that with our family as well, as you described. I think it's a great way to, it's the middle of the night, everything's closed, you can't, you're worried about your kids, whatever, to get that assessment. And I think in North America, it's interesting, like, with this COVID thing right now and the work the CDC is doing, we talk about privacy a lot with location data, but when it comes to healthcare, the U.S. government has, to their credit, relaxed the HIPAA compliance laws around privacy of personal health information, because people are getting sick, they're walking into clinics, they're getting assessed, and there may not be their normal doctor or whatever, and they these doctors, in order to treat you well and properly, they need access to your healthcare history and things like that. And so that sort of they've been able to relax those laws on a temporary emergency basis to enable this type of assessment in a time of need. And I think, in other countries, like the Philippines and others, where, maybe it's not so strict, but I think, this idea of being able to quickly assess people in a virtual environment, I think is something that is going to persist beyond this crisis. And it's something that our lawmakers need to get ready for here in North America. And I think, we're going to be in a situation where, we can't be always just so concerned about privacy when it comes to actually saving people's lives. So, I think that's, sort of for me, one of the things that just comes to mind when I see this story. The platform that they're providing, I think it's, just I love the number of things that they can do with the SIFT platform, but in particular, the telemedicine piece, I think right now is incredibly useful. So there you go. All right. Our final story is about a app called OutStreets. And this is a really interesting story. It's a Washington, D.C. based company founded by a guy named Mark Sussman. And they had built out their app platform, and they were just getting ready to go into a public launch when this crisis hit. And the original platform was for the consumer public to basically report dangerous driving behavior, badly parked e-bikes and scooters and things like that. Hence the name OutStreets. And they had launched the beta version of this quietly on Android and Apple in January. And so they were just getting ready to switch over to sort of the commercial version of the app, if you will. And then everything, the pandemic hit, businesses started closing down and so on. And then just by happenstance, Mark, I guess, knew the right people or whatever, and a conversation happened, with a government official. And they said, hey, can this platform be used to kind of monitor what's going on with food supplies and shelves in stores and grocery stores and things like that. So like we were talking about in the sort of first story, with Uber Eats, I think sort of the supply side of this is really interesting. And so what they've done is they've kind of pivoted the app to basically enable consumers to kind of go, as they're going into grocery stores, they indicate basically what they're there to find. Like, I'm here to get toilet paper, or, eggs or bread or whatever it is. And then they sort of report through the app to say, here's what I went in for. It was available here. And so indicating, whether there's a shortage or the shelves are empty, or whatever the case might be. They can select the item, they take a photo, they can submit that through that. They can indicate whether the shelf is fully stocked or half stocked or empty or sold out or whatever for the different items are. And they can even indicate whether the store is, doing a good job on social distancing and has markers, separating people on the floors and all that sort of stuff through the app. What I love about this is that if you are, sort of trying to observe the rules and follow all the stuff, and let's say, somebody, has gone there and reported this. It's kind of like a little bit like using Waze, right? Like where, you're there and somebody who's gone ahead of you on that road has reported that there's police up ahead, you might want to slow down, or there's an accident or whatever, kind of giving you that, sort of pre-warning, that information. And here what you're getting is, look, if I'm going out on my weekly grocery run or whatever it is right now, and there's certain items I need, one of the things that's been happening is people go out and they say, I need this, this, and this, and this. And they go to a store, and then maybe 2 out of the 5 things that they're looking for are not there. They're out of stock or whatever. And then they're like, I'm going to go to another store to find those other 2 things, right? And they end up going to like multiple stores, which is not what the government wants us doing right now. So if you're able to kind of look at, something like this through an app platform and say, hey, this store in my neighborhood, maybe there's 3 stores in my area, but this particular one, maybe it's a little further than the one I normally go to, has everything I need. I can just make one trip and be done and, expose as short a time as possible. And so that's really one of the key elements of what they're trying to do with OutStreets right now. Even employees who are stocking the shelves can submit information as new supplies come out. So if there's something that's been out of stock, the employees can then update and say, hey, we're now in stock. on this particular item and so on. So I really like it. I think it's a great way to kind of, hey, look, you were about to launch something. It's not really relevant right now because nobody's out on the street using e-scooters or whatever. Let's take what we built and kind of repurpose it for, the use of that makes sense in a COVID situation.
Yeah, I love the premise of this. I think that the only difference that I would say is like with Waze, obviously, your phone is sort of automatically reporting that when you're using the app. So there's a little bit more of an ease of use, but I like the idea of, employees being able to report what's there. And I actually had to go to the supermarket for the first time in weeks yesterday. Or the day before, I can't remember. All these days just run together. But, for me, I was like, my husband had told me when he had been to Trader Joe's previously, like how they did a really good job. They only let so many people into the store. There's like markings as far as social distancing goes. And then, I went to Publix, and first of all, they are out of a lot of things, a lot of things that I needed and I was looking for, but also like there was no social distancing really in effect whatsoever. And it made me feel very uncomfortable. The only time that they had any markings was like when you go to check out, which, you're passing people in the aisles and like there's people congregating. And it was just like, I don't know, it made me feel super on edge almost. And so I like the idea of having sort of that report of like, do they have what I need? Can I just go to one place to get all of this? Am I going to have to go make multiple stops or have to go back again in a few days? With kids, obviously, like you're constantly in need of like milk and, bread and simple things like that. And so it gets more complicated. So I really like how they've pivoted and they're thinking about how can they provide value again in this time, right? I think that it's connecting the needs of consumers with the technology that can provide that. And just because it was based on like parking and scooters or, all of those things at that point, it sounds like they're doing a really awesome, job, and fantastic open-mindedness of thinking of how can we pivot a little bit here. I think everybody's trying to figure that out.
Yeah. By the way, you're supposed to be baking your own bread now, Brianna. Come on. You know what? Like,
It's good.
I will say, like, at least my local grocery store that we go to regularly is doing a fantastic job. Like, I went there the other day, last week, to do a run, and so first of all, there's a lineup to get into the store. They're only letting so many people in at a time, and the lineup is everybody's is distanced, sort of the proper spacing outside of the store, waiting to get in. When you get to the entrance, and you where the shopping carts are, there's a guy standing there basically, with a disinfectant wipes, wiping down the cart and the handles and all that, and then handing you a cart. And then you walk in, and then like in the store itself, like everybody's like, just being polite and staying away from each other as best they can. And then like the aisles in this grocery store, there's arrows on the aisles. You can actually only go down the aisles in one direction now. In my store, so there's none of this like crossing things. Like it's one direction only, which is cool. And then like even in the checkout, it's all spaced out, like with markers on the floor and all that kind of stuff. So like they're doing what they can, right? But
there was somebody disinfecting the carts, but there was no like arrows or spacing or anything like that going on.
It's happening. So, but yeah, you got to be baking your own bread. I know a number of people now are like, raising their own chickens, like for eggs and stuff. Like that's happening. A bit hard to fit a cow in my backyard, but but we do have like a neighbor who's got chickens. So that's interesting. No roosters, thankfully. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I thought of like, oh, maybe we should plant a garden or something, simple like that. But I mean, I can't keep, I keep my children alive because they tell me when they're hungry, and they make a lot of noise, but plants and I just do not have that bond. So I think I'll be a little bit more dependent.
There you go. All right. Well, that's our show for this week. 4 industry news stories in there with a special guest as we kick off our members at home guest interviews. You've been listening to Location Weekly, episode number 459. Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching every week. Please reach out to us if you have story ideas or you want to be interviewed to share what you're doing or whatever the case might be. And by all means, please stay healthy, safe, distanced, and at home. Yeah, be well. Bye, everyone. See you next week.
Bye.